Welcome to A Course in Miracles in Practice.
Glad to have you with us.
Today we're going to start by reading the lesson, and then we'll talk about how you can take these concepts and actually use them in your everyday life.
Today we are diving deep into Lesson 103.
Let's get into it.
Okay, great.
Lesson 103. God, being love, is also happiness. Happiness is an attribute of love. It cannot be apart from it, nor can it be experienced where love is not. Love has no limits, being everywhere, and therefore joy is everywhere as well. Yet, can the mind deny that this is so, believing there are gaps in love where sin can enter, bringing pain instead of joy? This strange belief would limit happiness by redefining love as limited and introducing opposition in what has no limit and no opposite. Fear is associated now with love, and its results become the heritage of minds which think what they have made is real. These images, with no reality and truth, bear witness to the fear of God. Forgetting being love, he must be joy. This basic error we will try again to shift to truth today, teaching ourselves. God, being love, is also happiness. To fear him is to be afraid of joy. Begin your longer exercises for today with this association, which corrects the false belief that God is fear. It also emphasizes happiness belongs to you because of what he is. Allow this one correction to be placed within your mind each waking hour today. Then welcome all the happiness it brings. As truth replaces fear and joy becomes what you expect to take the place of pain. God being love, it will be given you. Bolster this expectation frequently throughout the day and quiet all your fears with this assurance, kind and wholly true. God being love is also happiness, and it is happiness I seek today. I cannot fail because I seek the truth.
There you have it. That was Lesson 103.
Beautiful, isn't it?
We can see right away that a central point of this lesson is the inherent connection between God, love, and happiness.
Absolutely front and center. And, the lesson makes this point so strongly with the very first statement, God, being love, is also happiness. Happiness here is not some sort of optional add-on. It's not just a side effect. It's presented as completely integral to the very essence of love itself.
Yeah, and then the lesson introduces this idea of what it calls a strange belief. And that's this idea that love could have limits, and that those limits would somehow create openings for pain.
Right. And this is one of those places where the Course really zeroes in on the ego. This is what the Course calls an ego-created illusion. The ego always wants to break things apart, to divide, to separate. So naturally, it tries to fragment the wholeness of God's love. It tries to say, well, maybe love is not infinite, maybe it's finite. And then within these pretend boundaries, it says, well, now there's room for sin and suffering. But really, this is all just made up. It's fabrication, right?
Yeah, and it's the basis of separation and fear. They just don't fit with true happiness. And, this is something we can all look at in our own lives. Like, how often do we maybe act as if love is some sort of limited resource? Like, we only have so much to give, or like we can run out, or like someone could take it from us.
Such an important point. And actually, the lesson also really directly confronts fear and basically calls it a misunderstanding of God.
And what I find so interesting here is how it reframes fear, right? The Course is suggesting that fear isn't actually a response to God. Instead, it's saying that fear is just a messed up perception of God's essence. Because if God is love and love is happiness, then to be afraid of God would be the same as being afraid of joy.
Like we're afraid of our own good.
Exactly. And the ego loves this, because it wants to maintain its own separate identity. It projects this fear onto God. And that just keeps God's loving and joyful nature hidden.
The lesson is really trying to shift how we think about happiness. We should see it not as something that just happens by chance, but actually as something to be actively anticipated. And it makes sense if you think about it, because happiness isn't some kind of maybe outcome. It's the natural, you could even say the unavoidable result of aligning with the truth. And the truth is that God is love and that love is everywhere. So as we let go of the illusion of fear and replace it with this reality of love, then joy just comes forward naturally.
It becomes what we expect. It's not luck anymore.
Exactly. And to help with this, the lesson gives us a very specific practice to do every hour.
Yeah, that hourly affirmation. Let's talk about that a little bit.
So the affirmation is, God being love is also happiness. And it's one of the key tools that the lesson gives us. It's designed to directly combat fear-based thinking, to remind us of the truth about God, which is that God is loving and that love brings joy. And so by repeating this affirmation throughout the day, you're consciously, actively replacing the ego's stories about lack and fear with the truth of inherent joy, like a constant reminder that cuts through all the noise.
So to recap the core insights of this lesson for everyone.
Well, first we have this powerful statement about the fundamental link between God, love, and happiness. The lesson clearly shows how the ego tries to limit love and bring fear into the picture. It reframes how we understand God and shows that God is the source of joy, not fear. And then it goes on to encourage us to actively expect happiness as just our natural state, and it gives us a concrete way to do that, which is the hourly affirmation.
Perfect. So now let's see how these concepts might actually play out in a real-life situation. Let's think about a college student named Teresa who is feeling pretty anxious about giving a presentation in class.
A classic situation. Most people can relate to the idea of public speaking being a little nerve-wracking, right? And so in the days leading up to her presentation, Teresa is just overwhelmed with worries. She's worried about making mistakes. She's worried about what her classmates are going to think of her. It's that basic human tendency to jump to the worst case scenario.
But during this time, she's also engaging with Lesson 103.
Yes, she's trying to put it into practice. So Teresa is making a very deliberate effort to work with that affirmation, God, being love, is also happiness. And this is a conscious choice to go against the grain of her fear-driven thoughts. She starts to recognize that her anxiety is all about a feeling of separation, a feeling of judgment, and she's actively trying to shift her focus to this understanding that she is already loved inherently, and that happiness is just the natural result of that love. In fact, she even extends that same perspective to her classmates, so instead of seeing them as potential critics, she starts to see them as fellow beings who are all connected by that same underlying love.
Beautiful. But then the morning of the presentation arrives, and those familiar feelings of anxiety come creeping back.
Oh, of course. I mean, we're all human, right? It's not like these things just magically vanish overnight. But the difference is that instead of letting fear take over, Teresa actually remembers the tool from the lesson, and she actually uses it. She pauses, takes a breath, and just silently repeats the affirmation to herself.
Really grounding herself in that.
Absolutely. And she also starts using visualization, but in a very specific way. She's not picturing herself giving this absolutely perfect, flawless presentation. Instead, she's focusing on effectively communicating her knowledge, connecting with her audience. And importantly, she's grounding herself in this knowledge that her worth comes from God's love, not from how well she thinks her presentation goes.
So powerful. And then during the actual presentation, when that wave of anxiety hits,
well, just as she's about to start speaking, she feels that surge of anxiety, and she immediately goes back to the practice from the lesson. She stops for just a second, takes a breath, and silently repeats the affirmation, God, being love, is also happiness. And this redirects her attention away from that internal fear and back out to her audience. And even when she stumbles over a word or something, instead of beating herself up about it, she just kind of laughs it off, keeps going.
Such a great example of putting this lesson into practice in the midst of that stressful situation.
Yeah, that's what it's all about, right? And it's about remembering that connection rather than striving for some kind of impossible perfection.
Absolutely. So after the presentation is over, Teresa takes some time to just reflect on what she went through.
And that step is so crucial because when she looks back on the whole experience, she realizes that the lesson really did have a concrete impact on how she was able to handle her anxiety all the way through. And even if she wasn't sure if the presentation was perfect or not, she could feel this underlying sense of peace and happiness. And this is a huge confirmation that her happiness doesn't depend on external validation or getting everything exactly right. The whole thing just ends up being a real-world demonstration of the lesson's core message, which is that true happiness comes from within, from understanding God's love.
So we can see how these ideas from Lesson 103 played out for Teresa in some really practical ways.
Yes, the lesson gave her an actual tool for managing anxiety by shifting her focus away from fear and towards that connection between love and happiness. It helped her reframe the whole event, to see it not as potential disaster, but as a chance to express herself, connect with others. It helped her to accept herself and let go of perfectionism. And in the end, it gave her a way to feel real inner peace, and it showed her the value of consistently working with the course.
Absolutely. So as we wrap up this deep dive into Lesson 103, the main message we're left with is this: God, love, and happiness are fundamentally one. And when we recognize this truth, it has the power to really dispel fear in our lives.
And this isn't just some abstract theological idea, it's something real that you can actually experience in your own life. The lesson invites us all to have this personal realization through consistent practice, through a willingness to question the ego's limiting beliefs.
So here's a thought to take with you. How might consistently embracing this understanding that God, being love, is also happiness, actually reshape your expectations and experiences, especially in those moments when you feel stressed or when you feel a lack of joy?
I think that's a great place to leave it.
I do too. If any of our listeners have thoughts or questions that came up during this deep dive, we'd genuinely love to hear from you. Please feel free to email us.
The address is acim@theworldharmonyproject.org.
That's ACIM@theworldharmonyproject.org. We look forward to hearing your perspective.